Well, shortly before we came on air, I brought together the Eurosceptic Conservative MP, Bernard Jenkin, and Roland Rudd, the leader of the pro-European Business for New Europe group. So, Bernard Jenkin, is Lord Lawson right that we're better off out now?
Well, yes, he is right. He's right particularly to say that any changes that David Cameron might be able to negotiate would be inconsequential, and therefore any new relationship, which is what the Prime Minister wants with the European Union, has got to be negotiated on the basis that we leave the existing treaties and we form a new relationship with the European Union and our European partners.
So how widely is that view shared on the Tory backbenches, do you think?
Well, I think this will have quite an effect on people's view. He was our
so opinion's
longest-serving...
shifting?
I think opinion is shifting and developing.
As a key point in his argument, Lord Lawson talks about the fact that the economic gains from British exit substantially outweigh the costs. He's been Chancellor. He's in a position potentially to know.
No, but I don't agree with that at all. I mean, the benefits to Britain are enormous, and they're primarily from the single market, which, of course, he had a hand in setting up in 1986, where we obviously had to get rid of our veto and pool sovereignty to ensure that we got this through against the French, who didn't want to see the creation of the single market. And the single market creates between 34 to 80 billion a year to the British economy, which is roughly between 1,300 to £3,500 per household. And it's a major boost to British jobs and British competitiveness, and it's incredibly important that we're part of it. And we don't just want to remain part of it, we actually want it extended towards areas such as the digital economy, such as transport, such as energy, and that could probably give another 7% boost to GDP, which would be worth around another 11 billion a year.
Figures?
Well, I mean, this is I'm afraid, something that the pro-Europeans always do. They argue that somehow if we weren't in the European Union, there would be no trade at all with the European Union.
No, but I never said that.
No, well, you said all these numbers, which are the total trade we do with the European Union.
Because that's the benefit. The benefits outweigh the costs.
Well, then how is it that China has increased its trade with the European Union much more than we have over the last 10 years? They trade from outside the European Union. Yeah. The idea that you can only trade with Europe if you are in the European Union is one of the biggest lies of this whole thing.
No. You can trade. You can trade with it. You can trade with Europe.
Thank you for that.
As Norway trades with Europe.
Yes.
But of course, the cost to Norway.
You always say 3 million jobs.
No. I was talking about the benefits outweigh the costs, right? And Lord Lawson was saying today the costs outweigh the benefits. I disagree, and you seem to agree with Lord Lawson that the costs are greater than the benefits.
80% of our economic activity is domestic or traded with the rest of the world. But our entire economy, all our businesses, are burdened with all the regulation and bureaucracy of the European Union, whether they're exporting Jaguars to China.
Let me just ask you, I'll move on for a second. What is wrong with the current number 10 position, which is a referendum in 2017 on new terms?
Well, clearly there's an urgency for a referendum. First of all, the British Chambers of Commerce have said that the referendum timescale is too long, creates too much uncertainty.
Well, the urgency is UKIP's...
but the second is a political urgency.
Local elections, isn't it?
If we don't win the election, there won't be a referendum. Even if Labour promises one, they're not going to hold a referendum.
And you're conceding that is in doubt?
Well, of course it's in doubt. Look at what damage the UKIP's doing to the Conservative... the UKIP came first or second in 55% of council seats fought last week.
Would there be parliamentary defections to UKIP, do you think?
Well, I mean, you're asking the question. I think it's a very good question to ask. But
what's your answer to that question?
At the moment, the Conservative Party is losing support to UKIP. We are losing our supporters. There are people defecting to UKIP. I think the Conservative Party becomes increasingly difficult to manage.
It's a possibility, at least, if you don't get a referendum in this Parliament.
But the situation we were facing quite a short time ago, if anybody had said, oh, well, UKIP are going to get 23% of the vote in the county council elections, or UKIP are going to come second in the Eastleigh by-election, we're witnessing something of a political earthquake.
You've worked with the Cabinet Minister Ken Clarke in the past, and Britain in Europe and so on. He called UKIP clowns. Do you think that Bernard Jenkin here is a clown for agreeing with what UKIP stands for?
No, I clearly don't think Bernard Jenkin's a clown, but I completely disagree with him. I mean, just to take him up on a couple of things. He gave the impression that all the regulations coming from Europe. It certainly isn't, and the House of Commons Library made clear that about 10% comes from the European Union. And indeed, Philip Hampton, the chairman of the Royal Bank of Scotland, did a very interesting report on regulation a few years ago, and actually said, in terms of the biggest regulatory burden that was coming from the UK Parliament. So let's put that in perspective.
Let me just push you on UKIP, though. I mean, presumably the view in the city is that these people are, to coin a phrase, fruitcakes, loonies and closet racists.
Well, obviously, Nigel, I mean, listen, I don't agree with anything Nigel Farage says, but I've debated against him. He's a very serious figure, and he did very well, as Bernard said, and you have to accept that. But the way, I think, to defeat him is not to imitate him. It is actually to fight him tooth and nail on these arguments.
You're never going to out UKIP, are you?
But actually, most voters agree with him. Plenty of people voting Conservative.
You agree with him? I mean,
yes, I do agree with him.
So then, in that case, why are you still in the Conservative Party?
I agree
why
with
not
him.
just throw in your lot with Nigel Farage?
Because actually, UKIP are wreckers, not winners. The one thing they're going to achieve is, if they succeed in advancing their electoral support, they'll make sure that Conservatives are not elected. There will be a Lib-Lab pact.
And they'll potentially split the Conservative Party.
That will be the end. That will be the end game.
No, end game. When you're talking about end game, you mean split of the Tory Party. That is potentially on the cards.
Well, the one thing I don't agree about Nigel Farage, we can't just have a plague on all your houses approach to the European Union. We're going to have to negotiate a new relationship. But he's right about one thing, which is our future is global, not just European.
Bernard Jenkins.
The future of British business is within the European Union. It would be a disaster for the city if we left. It is global, and we are Europe's financial centre.
Bernard Jenkins, Roland Rudd, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.